Hey folks, it's Soul with some more Dragonflight Alpha coverage. Use the navigation below to go over the part that you're interested in, and if you don't mind, like the video, subscribe for more content. Let's begin with skinning. I wasn't sure what to make out of how deep skinning could be, but you'll be surprised. To be fair, skinning is pretty straightforward. Kill mobs and skin them for loot, but the WoW team built a few things under the hood and added activities to make skinning feel kinda cool. Skinning, and I suspect the other gathering professions, herbalism and mining, have some new stats added to them, and that's perception, deftness, and finesse. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, I'm unable to tell for sure what these stats even mean, but I'm guessing that these stats influence your chance to find rare materials, maybe additional basic materials, maybe skinning speed or something else. These stats are influenced by your skinning equipment as you find them, your actual skinning level, but also your skinning specialization, which is what makes this trade skill much deeper than it used to be. Once you hit level 25 skinning, and you guys know how to do that, right? You can start investing into specializations. If you're familiar with my other previews, you know that with a higher skill level, you can then branch off into multiple paths. With skinning and the other gathering professions though, it feels like this one will be able to branch off sooner than later because gathering professions are just that, gathering. Nothing stopping you from no-lifing your way to max level right away, but thanks to specializations, max level skinning is only the beginning. So here are the spec trees. Tanning is what we're most familiar with. It makes us better at skinning creatures for leather on the left and scales on the right. Investing into this tree will make your skinning more productive and also let you refine lower level skins into higher level skins. With a recipe requirement of 5 of a thing to make the next rank up, this means that if one needed a rank 3 skin, they would need 5 rank 2 skins or 25 rank 1 skins to make the equivalent. I have a feeling though that in the long run these refining abilities won't be used all that much. One could argue that, at the start, rank 3 materials will be in demand and kind of hard to find. But as the expansion progresses, higher level crafters probably don't need high quality materials because their skills and specializations will let them craft efficiently. We're just gonna have to wait and see how the economy works out. Speccing into harvesting immediately provides a pretty interesting buff, increased damage to beasts and dragonkin in the Dragon Isles. Now sure, it only works outdoors, so the days of using a profession like skinning like it's a best in slot profession, well, those days are still behind us. But getting this kind of buff outdoors makes this particular skinner better able to handle themselves and just more efficient out in the field. Maxing this base ability will give a chance for additional ads to spawn while skinning for extra rewards. I guess you could think back to Legion, when picking herbs would sometimes spawn an extra mob. Also in this tree, skinners can opt to find materials to make fishing lures, which could be pretty valuable if this is the only way that lures can be acquired. The other paths include having a higher chance to obtain meat, aka cooking materials, and these special materials, which I'm willing to bet are rare materials that many crafters are going to need for higher end recipes. Finally, there's the bait crafter tree. It's not fishing bait, but this spec lets you create bait that, from the looks of it, will be used to open up special rares that can only appear if a skinner is around and they place bait to spawn it. From the sounds of it, this is more for the skinner than the player who happens to be passing by. I won't be surprised if, outside of kill credits, these rares are mostly for skinning materials and, pretty much nothing else. Now let's move on to Inscription. As you know, Inscription items come from herbs that are milled down to usable materials. In this current build, milling, like prospecting for jewel crafting, is kind of busted, meaning that it would take an unreasonable amount of time to obtain materials needed to test everything out. However, I still have a lot of information to share, so let's get to it. First, I haven't found a talent tome yet, which is very odd. Up until now, players have relied on tomes to change talents out in the field. Maybe enchanters will pick it up, we haven't had a profession review of that yet, maybe tomes just aren't a thing in the alpha yet, but that's where we're at. In Dragonflight Inscription, there are 4 known herbs to mill. In general, milling will produce a generic pigment, a unique pigment depending on the herb milled, and maybe a rare elemental material. One of the herbs just mills for more of the generic pigment, in case you need that. With 5 inks to make, Inscription is going to be a very hungry profession. As for what they'll make, we'll go down the list because there are quite a few new items to check out. Starting with something familiar, they create the missives for most of the crafting professions in order to customize stats. Without legendaries like in Shadowlands, it's definitely not going to be required for players to use crafting gear, but I'm still willing to guess that with all the armor and weapon crafting professions are capable of, missives will still sell quite well. Vantis runes are nothing new, but there are additional runes that seem to be replacements for weapon oils, adding a few stats that persist from death. Hopefully the values will be tuned a little bit better before this goes live, because at first glance, the cost and effort to make these is really bad. This round of weapons scribes can make all the way up to mythic item level. This includes an offhand and staves for casters and agility users. There's one other two-handed staff that at the moment doesn't have stats on it at all, which definitely could change, but it also fires a proc that gives what I think is a significant haste buff, so consider this one to watch. Like all the professions, they can make profession equipment to help crafters, we're familiar with contracts, and they can even unlock a high number of dragon riding customization options. One of the more interesting things scribes can make are these draconic treatise items, which grant the user specialization points. The recipe itself is very expensive, requiring quite a few expensive looking materials, but the item itself is also bind on pickup. Now at first glance this makes no sense at all, but consider crafting orders. This will give the possibility that a client could put in a crafting order requesting the scribe to make this item. It's sort of like buying spec points via the crafting order system. It's just a matter of what the client provides, or if they're willing to pay out a good chunk of change for the scribe's limited number of artisan's metal, the one bind on pickup reagent in this recipe. Probably at the center of scribe crafting would be these Dark Moon boxes, which use Dark Moon cards as a reagent. Now, according to a recent blue post, unlike previous expansions, the cards used for Dark Moon decks can be found by anyone, anywhere out in the world, giving players a basic but easy starter trinket. The Dark Moon box uses the deck as a reagent to be an endgame trinket, all the way up to mythic item level. What's more, you can add a Dark Moon sigil to customize the way the trinket behaves. By default, like previous Dark Moon trinkets, the effectiveness changes depending on what card is facing up. Sigils change that behavior, and at first glance, I don't see why I wouldn't want to slot my deck with a Sage Scale Sigil, which makes my deck shuffle only when I jump. As a tank, I'd have the most control over the power of my trinket here. But for now, let's just hope that the current cooldown of 3 minutes is reduced by the time this goes live. After going through so many item types, we're just gonna kind of run through specializations. There are 3 in all. Personally, I think rune mastery is pretty important because of how much work goes into just processing herbs into ink. Traits here make milling more efficient and ink crafting a little bit less costly, but without profession equipment, a scribe's multi-craft chance currently is very low. Archiving is where you focus on the trinket. The Dark Moon deck itself is on the left, while sigils are on the right. Investing will unlock the appropriate recipes and lets you work towards crafting the mythic level trinket of your liking. Treatises, or whatever you call them, as well as missives, those are in the middle if you want to take part in supporting the rest of the economy with these supplementary items. Finally, rune binding gives you access to weapons and other items. Wood carving lets you work on the two-handed staves and profession tools. Runic scripture lets you make the one offhand weapon, or to improve Vantis runes and the fauna runes that give the temporary stats. This week's professions turned out to be a lot more interesting than I thought it would be. I didn't think skinning would introduce some additional gameplay options, or that Inscription would have a Dark Moon trinket that actually could be used past Raid Finder difficulty. But now the floor is yours. What do you think of this week's updates? Let us know in a comment below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more Dragonflight content, and I'll catch you later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.